I was watching a series on YouTube about the deep web. I'm not going to say which one or which channel it's from because, truth be told, I don't gain anything by mentioning it. I just started looking for a video on how to get into that deep web. And I did it very much like that, lightly, without doing homework or anything. Big mistake, believe me. Now I know that using Windows for that is a very bad idea. It was clear to me that it's easy to get hacked if you use that system, as it's the most common one I know. I could have booted a live USB with a version of Linux, which is easy to find with a quick Google search and not as complicated as it sounds, but I thought, if my laptop goes bad, I'm in trouble. And since I can't afford to buy a new one right now, I decided to be resourceful and use my Android tablet instead. Yes, a brilliant move. Or not. After installing a couple of VPN apps, I started surfing the deep web, feeling like a kid in a store selling adult stuff, i.e., I had zero idea what I was doing, but my mind was overflowing with curiosity. All I knew was that it was easy to find shady stuff there, and unfortunately, I fell for some of it. As I started to see the parade of creepy stuff in there, I got a really bad feeling and almost shut everything down. But then I figured it was just bad luck and decided to be more careful. Let me make this clear. I'm not a freak with weird fetishes or anything, but the image of what I saw is going to be engraved in my head for the rest of my existence in this rotten world of ours. Late at night, I decided it was the perfect time to continue exploring. It was after 3 a.m., and I had heard that there was less activity on the deep web at night. I must say that I found some pretty curious sites, and there was also a lot of religious material. You'd be surprised how many Satanists there are out there, although most seem to be just teenagers trying to rebel against their religious parents. But I'm not going to get into my religious beliefs. Relax. Oh, there were also weird social networking and email services, can you believe it? Seeing this, I mentally said to myself, no thanks. I'm not looking for trouble, let alone being harassed by anyone, let alone wanting to fall for a scam or anything like that. So I was out of there in a jiffy. I remember there were tons of conspiracy theory blogs, from Justin Bieber being a reptilian from galaxy I don't know what, and a member of the Illuminati group, to leaked documents about human experimentation. I even saw a guy claiming to have found a way to travel between dimensions, like he fell down a literal rabbit hole according to him. But if you ask me, I happen to believe more that he smoked something he shouldn't have. Just when you think there can't be any more crazies loose in the world, you realize there's always room for one more. But one of the things that surprised me the most was the human experimentation. God, that's really scary. And if I had even a little faith in humanity, believe me, I would have lost it completely there. But it was completely gone when I saw the Red Room. I really hope with all my heart that these things are not real, that everything is just a setup. As I continued browsing, I came across a bunch of other weird stuff. Weaponry, pharmacies, naked pictures of celebrities, pirated movies, hackers for hire, hitmen, virus programmers. Literally everything. On one site, they were even offering stolen dollar bills that were marked for destruction because they were old or in bad shape. Seems like they were moving quite a bit. And of course, that doesn't help the economy, does it? But don't get me wrong. There was also legitimate stuff. For example, I visited a site by a super smart guy who was creating his own operating system and even had games and stuff that was very entertaining and surprisingly very well done. But one of my favorites was a fictional cult of people who called themselves. The people around there weren't as crazy as I expected. They seemed to be more open-minded, if a bit paranoid. Then I came across a site that supposedly gave you access to other people's computer webcams, and although I thought about it for a moment, my curiosity got the better of me. I thought I was going to see some girls out there, you know, but in reality I just found a bunch of people staring at their screens like automatons. eyes darting from side to side, and I was laughing at them when I suddenly saw myself reflected in the camera. How funny, I thought sarcastically, as I tried to cover my camera to give myself a scare. At first, it almost scared me, but as soon as I logged off, I realized how wrong I was acting, not to mention that this was totally illegal. So I decided to go back to the regular part of the internet and immediately started watching something on Netflix. Memories of my deep web adventures had slipped my mind, until my Skype started ringing. It was another Skype number calling me, one I didn't know. I thought maybe it was a friend trying out the app. I had been bugging one of them myself to connect so we could chat while playing on Steam, so I answered it. At first there was just silence, and then I heard a voice. It was a man. He sounded like he was over 50. Everything seemed weird, so I hung up immediately. I deleted all deep web-related apps from my tablet and rebooted my router. I have no idea how that guy got my Skype number, and honestly, I don't want to know. So if you're thinking about dabbling in the deep web, please take care of yourself. Do your homework first. Talk to someone who knows how to set up a decent VPN or any other form of anonymity. Trust me, that's stuff you're not going to find in the Google Play Store. Did you know that only 10% to 20% of the information on the internet is in browsers like Google and Yahoo? That means that almost 90% of the knowledge is out of our reach if we only use those platforms. And when you get into the dark web, that's where you really realize how much power the internet has. Ever since we were little, my best friend Lucas has been a computer geek. Lucas's dad had a shop where he fixed electronics, so whenever we weren't in class, we'd find ourselves there, playing with piles of parts that were everywhere. Once, his dad bought a used computer for very little. It was a little damaged, but he told us that if we repaired it, it could be ours, which we were pretty excited about. He was a cool guy who knew how much we loved gadgets and was always supportive. After a week full of books and many hours in the school library looking for information, we managed to get it fixed. We now had a computer, only 16 years old, and in those days the internet was a relatively new thing, so we took advantage of every spare minute to get online. We had accounts on Facebook, which was just being launched, and other old networks like MySpace. And we already realized that online commerce was going to be a big thing. But of course, everything changed when we discovered the most hidden and mysterious side of the net, the deep web. If you think the sky's the limit on the internet, wait until you meet the dark web. You'll be shocked by what's out there. It's not that the dark web is just for doing illegal things. It's more like a side street where it's harder to be tracked. And being the dumb teenagers we were, we did what any kid would do. After graduating, we both applied to the same university to study computer engineering. And guess what? We both got in. Our parents were super proud of us. And better yet, since it was a community college, we still lived at home while on campus. Around junior year, Lucas had a brilliant idea. We got into cybersecurity, hacking, and more. We knew a lot of people were naive, so we decided to take advantage of the opportunity and created a website on the dark web that offered services. I'm sure you're wondering, what kind of services? Let me tell you. We offered hitman services, and no, we weren't really hitmen. We learned in one of our classes that crime in America is a mess, and a lot of crime happens online, so we wanted to do something about it. We made our Hitman website as legitimate as possible to see who was logging on to it looking for these sinister services. Lucas Kleinfield was the CEO of our little shell company, or rather the fake CEO, and I, Ryan Jemson, took on the role of fake CFO. We simply filled the website with fictitious client testimonials and made up Hitman profiles. We made it look like any other legitimate online store, only our service offered men who did jobs on demand. We set it up in such a way that neither the police nor anyone else could trace a crime back to us. If I was a naive criminal looking for such a service, I would definitely have considered hiring one of the hired killers from our site. As it seemed completely legitimate, there was no reason to think otherwise. At first, our site didn't take off, as happens with any internet newbie. But after investing in advertising, we finally received our first order. A woman in her 30s named Erica Franklin contacted us. She was a housewife and mother of 4, who wanted a job against her husband's girlfriend, since the guy had cheated on her for a whole year with this young woman. I must tell you that although we had set up the website, we had no idea how to handle what came next. When Erica made the initial payment, she started giving me all the details about her husband and her lover, and picked a hitman from our list. But God, it was all a big mess. We had $4,000 in the bank, a target to take out, and Lucas and I were somewhere between excited and nervous because we were total rookies and had no idea what to do next. Just as we were thinking about what to do with our first call, we got another one. But this one wasn't from someone looking for revenge. It was like a big crime syndicate that approached us and wanted to hire a job, take out a rich executive of a pretty famous company in the country. They didn't want to get their hands dirty, so they decided to outsource the service to us. To make it easy, they offered us $5,000 up front. Truth be told, Lucas and I started to panic. We needed to act fast or the situation would get out of hand and we would be in very serious trouble, now that we were in the crosshairs of such dangerous people. Definitely expect something we hadn't thought of. The best we could come up with was to talk to our cybersecurity professor, because I knew he had worked with the police before and was a good guy. We went to his office and told him everything that was happening to us. His name was Emmer Adamus, and we knew he could help us. As we shared our madness with him, we thought he might get angry or disappointed, but instead he started laughing out loud. He told us that our project was brilliant, and that he would consider giving us extra credit for it. But we just wanted to get out of the mess we had created as quickly as possible. We had mentioned on our site that the action would take 12 days, so we were up against time. Professor Adamus made some calls and informed us that from then on, the cybercrime department would take over our site and use it to catch criminals and people who wanted to harm others. Also, the money we got in advance would be ours to keep. Lucas and I were between happy and nervous to hear that. After all, we were keeping the money from dangerous people, that referring to that syndicate of hitmen. Why, we figured that the housewife, frustrated by her husband's horns, would not be a threat. In the first week of taking control, the department dismantled the entire crime syndicate. Even the woman who wanted to eliminate her husband's mistress ended up behind bars. In spite of that, our site kept getting more and more clients, which was completely crazy. Thanks to that, many potential criminals were caught, and yes, we received all the deposits for creating the site. A year before we graduated, the cybercrime department asked us to create a similar site for other browsers, so we could catch more criminals. It has been 14 years since we started these sites, and we continue to help catch criminals on the dark web. Plus, this has made Lucas and I good money, and made the world a safer place. So, if any of you are looking for a hitman, just head on over to ribahitman.com. I remember my time in high school very well because we all call it the deep web phase. I don't know how it all started, but my classmates were obsessed with it. I remember they would dare each other to enter the dark web, and if you didn't accept, they would call you a chicken, and you became the laughingstock of the day. This made almost no one refuse, and so, every day someone new would come in with chilling tales of what they had found on that sinister part of the internet. The stories ranged from seeing grisly murders in those famous red rooms to buying illegal stuff on the infamous Silk Road. Practically everyone was doing it, and if you weren't, they were pushing you to do it anyway. It was like an initiation step to the more macabre, and it wasn't long before it was my turn. I distinctly remember the fear I felt the day my friends dared me to enter the dark web. Even though I was older and in my late teens, I wasn't comfortable with that kind of disturbing content, so I didn't know if I should do it. But deep down I knew that if I didn't, I would be the target of ridicule from all my peers, and the truth is that the pressure from my friends was overwhelming. They were all getting into the dark web, so I told myself that there was no reason not to try. That day I decided to take up the challenge, plucked up the courage, and downloaded the anonymity browser called Tor. For those who don't know, Tor is one of the few ways to get onto the dark web, because unlike the regular internet, the dark web is a chaotic and somewhat bewildering place, and there is no way to search for something on Google, as it has its own strange search engines. There are some well-known search engines on the dark web, such as Knot and Torch, and most people use them to navigate around, but if you're new to it, it can be a real mess, especially if you don't know what you're looking for. However, there was one specific site that my friends had told me to check out, and that was the Hidden Wiki. It's a bit complicated to explain, but in a nutshell, it's a place that brings together a collection of popular links on the dark web. That's the simplest way I can define it. When I finally got to the Hidden Wiki, I came across a bunch of links that led to illegal weapons, very hardcore illicit substances, and really disturbing content that can leave any sensitive eye well and truly traumatized. Anyway, there were a million different links, and there I saw some of the craziest sites on the dark web, like a forum where real cannibals talked about what it was like to eat human flesh, another one where crazy people ate live animals, and even a page where you could hire a hitman as if you were buying candy. I also found a link to a page called Human Experiments. This one really made my hair stand on end like never before in my life. Not for nothing is it considered one of the creepiest sites on the deep web. Apparently, the people who run it do horrible experiments on living people. I learned that there are videos of things like injecting pregnant women with bleach, or exposing babies to radiation, and some other atrocities I can't even mention. For the sake of my sanity, I left that page quickly, and kept browsing the Hidden Wiki as I tried to process everything I was seeing. But for some reason, there was one link that caught my eye. It was called Good Meat, also known as meat10.com. This site is famous for having a lot of horrible and extremely violent videos. When I clicked on that link, it took me to the steak and cheese homepage, and what I saw there made me feel like I could vomit up what I had eaten for dinner. Is fact, it still makes me nauseous remembering the things I saw. There were a lot of videos of children, some no more than 8 years old, being subjected to very cruel treatment, things I can't even describe. One of the videos, called The Divine Feast, showed live cannibalism, where a guy was eating pieces of dismembered human flesh directly from the corpse, which was there, live. The more I got into that site, the more fear and revulsion I felt. But just when I thought I had seen the worst of humanity, I came across a video titled Real Eaters. Basically, in it a group of people killed small animals, such as cats, birds, even rats, and swallowed them whole. In fact, in some cases they would eat them alive. I had been at the site only a couple of minutes, and already I wanted to get out of there immediately. I was beginning to doubt everything, and my faith in humanity was definitely lost. But before I could leave, I noticed a link that said, Miss Necrophilia. Curious, so I clicked on it. To my surprise, the girl in the video was a dancer, and she had several clips where she was singing and dancing with what looked like a plastic mannequin. Looking back, I don't know why I was still on that site after seeing so much twisted content, but curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to watch the whole video. At the beginning of the clip, the woman, who I guess was the tramp Miss Necrophilia, was looking at the camera with a lot of black mascara over and under her eyes, and her look is something I still remember with chills. Her eyes seemed completely empty, as if her soul was missing. It was a terrifying image, so I felt even more trapped in that horrible world. It was like watching the human version of Coraline, just as trick, but more disturbing. Suddenly, the scene changed to a living room, where there were 4 mannequins leaning on chairs. The room was better lit, so I could see better, but something struck me as odd about those mannequins. For one thing, they looked too real. One of them had hair that looked like that of a guy in his 50s, and 2 were mannequins of children, a boy and a girl who looked 7 and 9 years old respectively. As this dancer was interacting with them, I noticed that her fingers were moving in a strange way, and that gave me a weird feeling, like something didn't quite fit right. But it was one mannequin in particular that really left me confused. It was one that looked like a baby of about 9 months old. That made me too uneasy, because it looked like a normal-sized pale doll. Then, Miss Necrophilia took the biggest mannequin and started to tango with it while humming the melody. I couldn't understand what she was saying, as it was in another language, but as she moved and sang, I felt that there was something very wrong with what I was seeing. It was at that moment that I realized how horrible it all was. When the girl moved the mannequin a little closer to the camera, I noticed something very frightening. Thousands of maggots were coming out of it. From its mouth, its eyes, and its skin seemed to be coming off. That's when my mind finally realized that they were not mannequins or dolls. They were decomposing human bodies. They were stiff and covered in something that made them look like mannequins, and if it hadn't been for the close-up, I would never have noticed that they were already rotting. At that moment I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I was frozen, horrified, trying to scream. I was frozen, horrified, trying to understand why someone would dance with corpses in their living room. But the situation became even more disturbing when I saw a picture on the back wall, showing Miss Necrophilia pregnant, along with her husband and 2 children, and to further frighten me, they looked strikingly similar to the decomposed corpses. My stomach twisted like never before, and I felt bile rising in my throat. I just couldn't take it anymore, and right there I threw up everything I had eaten that afternoon. It was really lucky that I had the garbage can nearby at that moment. I don't know how long I was there, maybe 10 minutes or more, when suddenly a dialogue box appeared on the screen that broke my trance. It was a message from an anonymous chat on the dark web that said, "You've been watching this video for a long time, buddy. I guess you enjoy the content of Miss Necrophilia. I'm a big fan myself. Did you know she takes orders? I'm sure Mandy would be the perfect candidate for your next dance. After all, she does take ballet lessons." When I saw the name Mandy, my heart sank into my chest and down into my stomach. I gasped and jumped out of my chair. It couldn't be her, could it? The name was the same as my 11-year-old little sister's. But the scariest part was that I knew she had ballet classes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And that day was March 4th, 2009, a Wednesday. An adrenaline rush coursed through my body, and fear coursing through my veins. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, talking at full speed, almost running over the words because of how scared and nervous I was, but they thought it was a joke. They didn't take me seriously at all, so I called my mom and asked her where Mandy was. She replied that school was over, and that she had dropped her off at her ballet classes. I felt like my world spun around, and I asked her to call the school right away. And before she asked me anything, I told her that there was no time to explain and to just do as I told her. Immediately, my mother dialed Mandy's ballet school, and then was told that she was not there at the time. Upon hearing that, I felt all the color drain from my face as I thought of the worst that could happen. I wanted to explain to my mom what had happened, but I couldn't find the right words. It was something I couldn't convey over the phone, so I ran out to her office, which luckily was close to home and took me less than 8 minutes to get there. I was panting and on the verge of a seizure, so I needed a few seconds to calm down before I told Mom everything. But when I finished, she came over and slapped me. She had never hit me before, and I knew exactly why she did it. I had endangered my little sister over a stupid dare with my friends. I knew I deserved that slap like few things in my life. In that instant, I saw her eyes fill with tears, and the fear in her was more than visible as she dialed 911. She explained to the operator everything that had happened, and in the end, we were just told to be patient, and that we had to wait 24 or 48 hours before reporting Mandy missing. But my mother would not be quiet. She begged the officers to do something right away, because she felt that time was vital for my sister. It was thanks to an old friend of hers who was a police officer that they were able to convince his superiors to begin a search. Within an hour, officers were filling the streets with pictures of my sister, asking if anyone had seen her, and after telling them everything, I joined the search with them as well. With each passing hour, my heartbeat quickened more and more, and anguish consumed me. We searched for 13 hours, covering the whole town, but found nothing. My mother was completely devastated and couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't blame her. She had every reason to be hurt with me for my foolishness. As the tension mounted, I began to think the worst, imagining Mandy being attacked by that psychopath or whoever was after her. I also wondered if I would see her in the next Miss Necrophilia video, and that thought alone gave me goosebumps. Night fell, and after hours of searching, the officers and volunteers were exhausted. Energy was beginning to wane, and many wanted to return home to continue tomorrow. But just as we were about to give up, we received the news that Mandy had been found. Without thinking, we rushed off to the right location. Fortunately, Mandy was there, and my mom cried tears of joy as she hugged her and realized she was fine, even though she had been under the effects of chloroform according to the paramedics. When we asked her what had happened, she told us that she had been taken out of her ballet class shortly after our mom dropped her off. She couldn't remember much, as everything became a blur, but there was one thing she didn't forget. She looked me in the eye and said, "He told me to say hello to you," he said, "Say hello to Howie." I was frozen and speechless. All this put the whole town on alert, and we had to temporarily move in with my grandmother while the authorities kept watch on our house to make sure we were safe. They questioned me again, and I told them all about how I had been surfing anonymously, but they told me that didn't matter with the guys lurking on the dark web, as they could access my IP address or even my computer camera, thanks to hacker skills. The detectives believed this was how they had gotten such privileged and personal information about me and my family so quickly. They tried to track down the guy who had kidnapped my sister, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. In the end, like many things on the dark web, it was impossible to track, and no matter how hard they tried, it was as if the guy had vanished. As for the search, they also tried to locate the girl with the weird videos, but that proved just as impossible. Apparently, they had deleted all of her content from the site just as the investigation began. When I returned to school after all the chaos, I heard that everything related to the deep and dark web had slowed down a bit. The teachers and authorities were nagging everyone about staying out of those things, as a warning message to keep us out of trouble like the one I got into. On the other hand, Our family had a hard time getting over what happened. My mom said she forgave me, but deep down, I knew I could never forgive myself for what I put everyone through. So please, to everyone listening to this, take my experience as a lesson. Stay away from the dark web. While it may seem like a fun place at first, I know that any simple click can leave you scarred forever. My best friend Jake had created a little YouTube channel called Jake's Food Tastings. It was a place where he would upload videos of him tasting and commenting on different foods and drinks from all over. It had about 11,000 subscribers, and while it wasn't a giant channel, it was enough that Jake could take it seriously. I remember many times when I would sit in the passenger seat of his car, parked out of frame while he was getting ready to record a new video. He would always announce that he was going to try something new he had purchased, and would close with his famous thumbs up or down, and his catchphrase, "I love it, so I hate it." His positive energy and friendly manner endeared him to his audience. He was very charismatic, and rarely received negative comments. And when he did, he would just ignore them and keep smiling. Sadly, Jake's channel suddenly shut down a few months ago, as if it had never existed. I didn't hear from him, even though I tried to call him and went by his house several times, but to no avail, and 7 days after he shut down the channel, I decided to call the police, because I was really worried that something serious had happened to him. The officers checked his house, but found nothing unusual, and a week later, he was reported missing. A week after Jake was reported missing, a dog walker found a dead body on a railroad track. The body was horribly mutilated, with deep cuts around the head, arms, chest, and legs, almost split in two at the waist. His organs were in a terrible state, scattered outside a V-shaped wound. The autopsy could not determine with certainty how he died, although the large wounds on his neck were most likely the cause. In addition, there were disturbing findings. His stomach and heart were missing, and strips of flesh had been torn from his chest, arms, and lower back. Although the scene was not particularly gory, the body was almost completely drained of blood. 2 weeks later, investigators managed to identify the victim because despite the damage, his teeth were good enough that he could be matched to dental records, and at that moment, my worst fears were realized. The police confirmed that the body was Jake's. They investigated but found no evidence to suggest anyone else was involved and ultimately concluded that he had been hit by a freight train. The injuries and mutilations were attributed to his body being dragged, and what was missing was explained as having been eaten by wild animals, such as a fox. The condition of the body was such that his mother decided it was best to cremate what was left of her only son. I stood by his side as the coffin was placed in the giant furnace. When the doors closed and the gas was turned on, she began to cry inconsolably, and I did too. I spent 2 hours there, sobbing, as one of the most important people in my life turned to ashes. I cried for my friend, as if a piece of my heart was being ripped out, and I couldn't imagine what it was like for his mother, but I tried to keep going. I distracted myself a bit, got a new job, and started dating a girl I met at the office. A few months went by, and although I missed Jake, things were going well, until one night, browsing Reddit at 2 a.m., I got a Facebook message from my deceased friend's account. I froze as I saw his profile picture in the messaging bubble, a picture of those good times, with his wide, infectious smile. Suddenly, a sense of dread came over me, that shiver that runs down your spine and makes you feel short of breath and usually tells you that something spooky is about to happen. I plucked up my courage and opened the message, and there I saw a link to a file-sharing website. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell was on the other side of that link? My mind was spinning, wondering why Jake, who was no longer in this world, had sent this to me. Unable to help myself, I moved my cursor to the link, and despite my instinct telling me not to, I clicked before I could stop myself, but immediately regretted it. Chrome opened a new tab, and I saw that the screen was gray, except for a black rectangle in the center with a play button. I looked at it, paralyzed with fear. I don't know how long it took, but after about 10 or 15 seconds, the screen changed and the rectangle said, "Autoplay in 5 seconds." I counted second by second under my breath, trying to figure out what was going on, and when the video started, a buzzing sound made me jump. The camera showed what looked like a dirty white tile floor. Then I heard a muffled groan and footsteps approaching. The camera creaked as it adjusted, and when it came back into focus, I let out a scream. Jake was face up on a stainless steel table, wide-eyed with terror. The light from a hanging bulb shone on his sweat-covered forehead, and his chest was rising and falling rapidly, clearly in panic. He looked into the camera and tried to scream, but the sound was drowned out by a cloth gag covering his mouth, and his hands were tightly bound with duct tape. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, feeling increasingly sick. My mind could not process what I was seeing. Just as I was trying to comprehend the situation, the sound of Jake squirming was interrupted by a mocking voice saying, "Welcome to Jake's online food review. We have something special today." This sent a shiver down my spine. The voice sounded nonchalant, as if nothing was wrong, while Jake's panic increased as he tried to break free. The voice continued, "Today I will taste something that is considered a delicacy in many countries, although it is generally forbidden." The camera zoomed out slightly, and a man appeared in front of Jake, dressed in a white coat and a red and black striped apron. He wore a butcher's hat and a cloth mask, with black rubber gloves, like the ones you use to take out the garbage. In one hand he held a huge butcher knife, and in the other, a sharpening rod. He then began to run the knife gently up and down, creating a haunting metallic sound. Jake's muffled screams intensified, and the guy put down the sharpening rod to get closer. My poor friend tried to speak, sounding like he was pleading. He was saying something like, "No, please," as he moved. But the guy smiled at him in a scary way, and told him it wasn't going to hurt for long and that it was going to be delicious. From where he stood, I could see that his eyes were filled with tears and terror as he tried to struggle. The man bent Jake over the table, sticking his head out over the edge. He then left the table and returned with a metal bucket which he placed just below his head. In one swift movement, he grabbed a lock of hair and lifted Jake's head. Without thinking, he began to slit his throat. Blood gushed from his neck like a stream and stained the bucket and the floor. Jake jerked uncontrollably as the blood erupted from him like an erupting volcano. I, unable to bear what I was seeing, vomited and fell out of my chair in horror, turning away from the sight as the sound of the computer echoed with the sound of a cut and a grunt. I felt on the verge of a panic attack, so I curled up in a corner, sobbing as I began to shake and the air was knocked out of me. When it all stopped, I got up, still shaking, and went to my computer, trying to avoid the puddle of whatever I had vomited on the floor. I forced myself to look at the screen, hoping it was all a nightmare, but no, the page had closed, and Chrome was only showing Reddit. I inadvertently noticed that the Facebook tab had a notification. I didn't want to click, but curiosity got the better of me. Besides, what could be worse? In the end, I did and opened the message. It was from Jake. I like it, so I hate it. My name is Alex. I'm 26 years old and I'm an internet addict. It's like a parallel world where people play, work, entertain themselves, study, search for information, express their opinions, buy and sell, and do a lot of other things. Sometimes even important events are generated in what we usually call reality. But of course, as in any giant and complicated place, the internet also has its dark corners. Speaking of the deep web, that's the darkest part of the internet, the huge iceberg of which we only see a small tip. Most people have no idea that the deep web represents about 90% of all the information in cyberspace. And since I knew it existed, I was determined to explore it, despite all the things I had heard about it, because there were many warnings, but after thinking about it for a while, I decided to take the plunge and went straight to level 3. That's where the forbidden began, where the sites are so strange that not even the search engines can find them, not even if you copy and paste the complete URL. In this level, there was everything. Disturbing or simply absurd pages, sites abandoned for more than 13 years, materials that do not appear on the normal web because they are protected by copyright or have simply disappeared. I found markets for weapons, drugs, and bomb-making tutorials, as well as content that was clearly illegal, such as videos and photos showing murders. It was already said that in the previous level there was some gore, but here it was much more intense, with live murders, killers in action, and even human organ trading, and everything else morbid and twisted you can imagine. However, as the hours went by, I started to get a little bored, and decided to move up to the next level. In the previous level there were compromising things for governments, but in this one there are military secrets about the most horrendous projects of the states. Here I found out what missiles some countries are hiding, and what cyber weapons they have in store, and, curious as I am, I opened one of those famous red camera videos, and saw how they killed a guy who was no more than 20 years old. The poor guy begged for his life, said he had a family, and had never hurt anyone, but to no avail. Before they killed him, they sent out a poll to those watching, asking if they should let him live. I voted yes, but clearly the rest of the audience didn't think so. So, in one glance, the guy slit his throat with a quick, precise motion. The camera zoomed in on his eyes as he tried to cover his wound, but there was nothing I could do. In the blink of an eye, the show was over and the lights went out, as some men came in to clean up. Feeling like I was going to throw up, I decided enough was enough and left as quickly as possible. I wanted to move on to the next level, where there would be no more murders, but state secrets and information that no one should know about. It took me quite a while to get in, but when I finally made it, I understood why most people stayed on the lower levels. Because as soon as I logged in, my computer suddenly rebooted, with nothing weird showing on the screen and no power outages. When it finally rebooted, I saw that my hard drive was completely erased. On the desktop, there was only a notepad file in the center of the screen, almost as if it wanted me to see it, and without thinking too hard, I opened it. The message was short and scary. Don't do it again. I got so scared that I didn't go back into the deep web for several days, and during that time I reinstalled a few things from a backup I had. I thought that was the worst thing that could happen, losing all my data, but I was wrong. A few days later, curiosity got me again, and I decided to log into Tor again. I entered the first deep web link I found, even though I knew I wasn't at a very advanced level. However, my computer rebooted itself again, and all my data was deleted again. This time, no strange message appeared on the desktop. I was simply blocked from accessing the deep web from my computer, forever. 20 minutes after rebooting and formatting, the doorbell rang. I asked who it was from the intercom, but no one answered. So I went down to the entrance of the building, but no one was there. I only found an envelope waiting just under the door. This had no return address or anything written on it, but I had a feeling it was for me. I went up to my apartment, entered my room and opened the envelope while sitting on my Christmas green carpet. The message completely terrified me. This is not a game. Don't do it again. Don't make us come after you." As I read this, my hands began to shake and tears began to fall down my face. Whoever it was, they knew who I was, where I lived, and what I did. And to make matters worse, attached to the message was a picture of me taken with my webcam, along with pictures of my family, my friends, and even my little sister who was still in kindergarten. Desperate, I called the police, although I didn't know what to say. But when they finally responded, in the back of my mind, I knew they couldn't do anything. Suddenly, as I looked at the reflection on the screen, I saw a hooded guy approaching. However, when I turned around to defend myself, it was too late. The man grabbed me by the head and slammed me against the keyboard, and as he did, I heard his distorted voice say, "I told you this is not a game." Still groggy and trying to struggle, I felt a cold prick in my arm, and within seconds, I began to feel incredibly drowsy and drifted off to whatever it was they had injected me with. I closed my eyes, and when I woke up, my whole house seemed normal, but something was wrong with my computer. It wouldn't turn on. When I checked it, I noticed that the processor, video card, and hard drive were missing. That man who visited me had stolen the most expensive components and left my computer a mess. But at the time, I didn't care. I was so terrified that I asked at work to be transferred to another city. Since then, I never went on the deep web again, and I don't think I'll ever try it again, no matter where I go. Fate was cruel to me, but after remembering how I was at the mercy of that guy and what happened, I realized that despite everything, I am lucky to be alive. Before I begin, I think it's worth clarifying the difference between the deep web and the dark web. The deep web is that part of the internet that you can access using browsers like Tor, where you can find very illegal things like drugs, human trafficking, and hitmen. The dark web, on the other hand, is everything that is beyond the reach of normal access, such as military sites and other spaces that are not part of the structure of the internet we use today. With that clear, let me tell you how I ended up in this dark corner of the web without meaning to. I'm Eric, a computer technician who helps companies and individuals keep their computers in shape. I work solving internet problems, installing software and anything else people might need. So I've heard all kinds of crazy stories, and sometimes I wonder how some users can live with their technological know-how. One day, I got a call from a local company that was very upset because their internet wasn't working, and they thought they had a virus. I snorted in annoyance, thinking I had probably just unplugged a cable or something. When I arrived, the guy who called me kept going on and on about hackers, his hatred of Windows, and how that operating system was full of viruses. In short, all cliché, typical of the job. The guy took me over to his computer. I pulled out my laptop, sat down, and started doing my thing. He wished me good luck and went off to do whatever he was doing to pass the time. When I opened his browser, he didn't even have a homepage. I tried to access google.com, but I got a 405 error. That can't be. So I already knew there was a problem with the connection. So I went to the network center to try to diagnose it, but drew a hand seeing that I was disconnected from any network. So I looked for available connections and saw that there were some networks, but they were all protected with web encryption. I don't think the guy had the key, so I pulled out my laptop and started using a web decryption tool to get his connection working again. While I was waiting for my tool to work its magic, I suddenly verified that another network appeared on my computer. It was an unprotected connection that had a very strange name, like a string of numbers and letters. With nothing to do and waiting for the guy to come back, I decided to connect to that network and explore a bit. I connected with no problems and opened my hacking tools to see where it came from, but as I fiddled with the open network, suddenly my computer froze, albeit only for a couple of seconds. That doesn't happen often. So I was quite surprised, but I didn't think much of it and kept working. At first I ignored it, thinking it was just the slow internet, but after a few minutes it happened again, and then again. Then I started to feel that something wasn't right with that network. After a while, things got weirder. My screen flickered and suddenly the browser opened by itself. That was the sign that alarmed me. I was afraid I had contracted some malware by connecting my laptop to that network, so I tried to close the browser and disconnect. But it was like I was stuck. No matter how much I clicked the disconnect button, my computer did nothing, even though everything else on the screen seemed to work normally. I thought, great, this was going to be a long day. Just as I was about to restart the laptop, the browser opened again, but this time with a chat box. "Hi, I want to talk to you now," it said. I stared at the screen, not knowing what to think, and thought maybe it was one of those artificial intelligence bots trying to carry on conversations. Still, I felt uncomfortable, like it was a virus or something. "You need to leave this network now. This is your last warning," the message said. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to respond, and the response that followed was terrifying. The program started giving me details about me. My name, address, phone number, even my credit card information and my parents' addresses. I felt like the world was falling on top of me, and for a second I froze in fear, unable to move. But the worst was yet to come. "Don't look at me like that. Your camera is on. You should close this, or you're going to see something that will make you regret it." After that message, out of nowhere, my screen filled with the most gruesome images you can imagine. Dismembered bodies, human sacrifices, cannibals devouring people, clips of mass suicides, and a long etc. My heart was pounding like crazy, and my body was shaking with panic. These were things that no one should have to watch, so I steeled myself and hit the power button on my computer, shutting it down with a jolt. I ran to the bathroom and threw up a couple of times, drenched in sweat and with a blank mind. It took me about 25 minutes to pull myself together, and even then, I struggled to get near my computer again. When I looked at my client's computer, it was connected to that network I was trying to figure out, and everything was working smoothly. At that point, the client came back and thanked me for fixing his internet, but I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my laptop and left, feeling that I had had enough of that place. That was the scariest experience I've ever had in my job, and a series of warning about what I should never do again. Log on to the dark web,